The grand hall of the Galactic Confederation gleamed with light from 1,000 different worlds. Ambassador Zithrael stood at the central podium, his blue skin shimmering under the soft glow of the chamber's bioluminescent ceiling. Around him, representatives from 47 different species listened with calm attention. Some had scales, others had fur, and a few existed as clouds of sentient gas contained in elegant crystalline vessels. They had gathered for their monthly assembly, where the greatest concern was usually trade disputes or cultural exchange programs. Zithrael raised his three-fingered hand, and the murmuring stopped. His voice carried through the chamber with practiced ease. My friends, my colleagues, my family across the stars. Today marks the 300th anniversary of the Great Peace. 300 years without a single act of war. 300 years without bloodshed between our peoples. Applause rippled through the chamber, expressed in dozens of different ways. Some clapped, others hummed in harmony, and a few released pleasant scents into the air. High Curator Mevla, a being made entirely of living crystal, chimed softly from her elevated seat. The sound meant approval in her language. We have proven, Zithrael continued, that intelligence leads to peace. That civilization means moving beyond the primitive urges of violence and conquest. We resolve our differences through words, through courts of arbitration, through understanding. In the human section of the chamber, a small delegation sat quietly. There were only 5 of them, led by Ambassador Patricia Reeves, a gray-haired woman with tired eyes. She listened without expression as Zithrael spoke. Next to her, Dr. James Okoye, a xenoanthropologist, took notes on his datapad. Which brings us, Zithrael said, his tone shifting slightly, to a matter of continued concern. The humans, our newest members who joined us 50 years ago, maintain what they call a defense fleet. They spend enormous resources building weapons and training soldiers for wars that will never come. Several species turned to look at the human delegation. Ambassador Reeves kept her face neutral. She had heard this speech before many times. We understand, Zithrael said, trying to sound sympathetic, that humanity comes from a difficult history. Your world knew much conflict. But here in the Confederation, such things are relics of a darker age. We must ask once again that humanity consider reducing its military expenditure. Those resources could feed billions, advance science, create art. Ambassador Reeves stood slowly. The chamber quieted. When she spoke, her voice was measured and polite. The people of Earth thank the Confederation for its concern. However, our position remains unchanged. We maintain our fleet not out of aggression but out of caution. We hope never to use it, but we will keep it ready nonetheless. A Valorian counselor, tall and elegant with skin like polished copper, spoke up. But Ambassador Reeves, what do you fear? We have eliminated war. The galaxy is safe. The galaxy you know is safe, Dr. Okoye said quietly, earning a sharp glance from Reeves. He stood anyway. The galaxy is vast. There are regions we haven't explored, phenomena we don't understand. We simply believe in being prepared. Zithrael smiled, the gesture one he had learned from studying humans. And that is exactly the primitive thinking we must move beyond. Fear of the unknown. Preparation for violence that will never occur. This paranoia serves no one. The Council voted, as they had before, to formally request that humanity reduce its military spending. And as before, the humans politely declined. The matter was tabled for another month. After the session ended, Zithrael approached the human delegation. Despite his public criticism, he genuinely liked Ambassador Reeves. She was intelligent and thoughtful, even if her people were stubbornly backwards. No hard feelings, I hope, he said, extending his hand in the human custom. Reeves shook it firmly. None at all, Zithrael. You're doing what you think is right. So are we. May I ask you something in private? Zithrael glanced around, then lowered his voice. Do your people truly believe war might come again? After 300 years of peace? Reeves studied him for a long moment. My grandfather used to say something. The cost of freedom is eternal vigilance. We don't want war, Zithrael. We hate it more than you can imagine. But yes, we believe that peace must be protected, not just hoped for. Zithrael shook his head sadly. Then I hope, for all our sakes, that one day your people will evolve beyond such fears. Reeves smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. I hope we never have to prove we were right. Far away from the gleaming halls of the Confederation capital, in the deep darkness at the galaxy's edge, something stirred. Commander Velik of the scout ship Wandering Song studied his sensors with growing confusion. He was a krill, an insectoid species known for their patience and attention to detail. For 3 days he had been tracking an anomaly that made no sense. "These readings are impossible," his science officer said. She was young, barely out of academy, and this was her first deep space assignment. Energy signatures that don't match any known stellar phenomenon. Movement patterns that suggest artificial origin. But there's nothing there when we scan directly. Velik clicked his mandibles, a gesture of thought. "Send a detailed report to Confederation Command. Mark it as Priority 2. Priority 2 meant unusual but not urgent. Priority 1 was reserved for emergencies, and Velik had never sent a Priority 1 message in his 30 years of service. Message sent, his communications officer confirmed. "Should we investigate closer?" Velik considered. The Wandering Song was a civilian vessel with basic sensors and no weapons beyond meteor deflection lasers. But they were scientific explorers. Strange readings were exactly what they were meant to investigate. "Take us in slowly," Velik ordered. "Keep all sensors active. At the first sign of danger, we jump away." The ship moved forward, its gentle drives pushing it toward the source of the anomaly. The crew watched their screens with scientific curiosity rather than fear. They lived in the safest era of galactic history. What could possibly threaten them? The readings grew stronger. Energy patterns spiked across the spectrum. The science officer gasped as new data flooded her console. "Commander, I'm picking up organic signatures." Massive ones. "And they're moving." Before Velik could respond, space itself seemed to tear open. Something emerged from the darkness. Something that made his ancient evolutionary instincts scream. It was huge, organic, alive in a way that defied nature. The hull was made of what looked like chitin and bone, pulsing with bioluminescent veins. It didn't look built. It looked grown. "Emergency jump," Velik shouted. "Get us out of here now!" The communications officer's voice cracked with panic. "Sending Priority 1 distress." The transmission cut off mid-word. On the thing's hull, 1,000 eyes opened at once, all focused on the tiny scout ship. The Wandering Song tried to run, its jump drive charging desperately. But tendrils of living matter shot across space faster than thought, wrapping around the ship like a spider catching a fly. In the Confederation capital, Zithrael was having dinner with colleagues, laughing about the day's proceedings. Ambassador Reeves was aboard a transport heading back to the human diplomatic station. And in deep space, the Wandering Song was pulled into the massive creature's maw and consumed ship and crew without a trace. The last thing Velik saw was more of the creatures emerging from the dark. Dozens of them, hundreds. An armada of living nightmares all heading in one direction, toward the heart of the Confederation, toward the worlds that thought the age of war had ended forever. The emergency session was called at midnight, Confederation Standard Time. Zithrael rushed into the chamber still wearing his sleeping robes, his face tight with worry. Around him, representatives arrived in various states of dishevelment. High Curator Mevla's crystal surface flickered with agitated light patterns. Commander Thalsis stood at the central podium, his insectoid features unreadable, but his posture radiating tension. He held what was supposed to be a ceremonial position, Defense Coordinator of the Confederation. For 300 years it had been exactly that, ceremonial. Until now. 3 worlds, Thalsis said without preamble. Kepler 17, New Harmony, and Velshar Station. All went silent within 48 hours. No distress calls. No evacuation signals. Just silence. The chamber erupted in confused murmurs. Zithrael felt his stomach tighten. 3 worlds didn't just go silent. It was impossible. "We sent investigation teams," Thalsis continued. "They found nothing. Not destroyed worlds, empty worlds. Every living being gone. Buildings intact. Ships still in orbit. But no people. No animals, no plants. Nothing alive remained." A crystalline delegate chimed urgently. "Disease? Some kind of plague?" "We considered that," Thallis said. "But a plague doesn't take all life, every form of it, in perfect synchronization. And it doesn't do this." He activated the central display. Holographic images appeared showing cities on the 3 lost worlds. The buildings stood undamaged, but something was wrong. The surfaces were covered in a strange organic residue, like dried mucus or webbing. It coated everything in a thin layer. Dr. Okoye, present as part of the human delegation, stood abruptly. His face had gone pale. Commander Thals, do you have chemical analysis of that residue? Yes. Thalsu sent the data to Okoye's pad. Why, do you recognize it? Okoye's hands trembled as he read. He looked up at Ambassador Reeves, who had also gone very still. We need to access the Confederation Historical Archives immediately. Section Theta 9 records sealed 2,000 years ago. High Curator Mevla's chimes took on a warning tone. Those archives are restricted. They contain information deemed too disturbing for general knowledge. I know what they contain, Okoye said quietly. And if I'm right, we're all in terrible danger. Within the hour, the council gathered in the secure archives chamber. Ancient data crystals lined the walls, containing information from civilizations long gone. Okoye worked the interface with practiced efficiency, clearly having studied these systems before. The humans have been researching our ancient history since you joined, Thals observed. Why? Because we learned long ago that those who forget history are doomed to repeat it, Ambassador Reeves said. Show them, James. Okoye brought up records from 2 millennia past. Images appeared of creatures that made the council gasp in horror. They looked similar to the organic ships in the scout ship's final transmission, the one Velik had managed to send before dying. They were called the Devourers, Okoye explained, a hive-mind entity that consumed entire civilizations. Not for territory or resources in the traditional sense. They harvested all biological matter, all life, to fuel their own growth and reproduction. I know these stories, Zithrael said, his voice shaking. Every child learns them as myths, cautionary tales about the old days. But the ancient civilizations destroyed the Devourers. The war lasted 100 years, but they won. They thought they won, Okoye corrected. The Devourers disappeared. The ancients assumed they were extinct. But what if they were just dormant? What if they were waiting? As if on cue, alarms began blaring throughout the chamber. Thals's communicator erupted with frantic messages. His mandibles clicked rapidly as he listened. Another world. Tarsus Prime. We're receiving distress calls now. They say the sky is filled with organic ships. They're being attacked. Deploy defensive forces, Mevla commanded. Thals looked at her helplessly. High Curator, we don't have defensive forces. We have patrol ships with mining equipment and cargo vessels. The last military warship was decommissioned 290 years ago. The reality crashed over the council like a cold wave. They had spent 3 centuries dismantling every weapon, every warship, every military installation. They had turned themselves into a civilization utterly incapable of defending itself. Ambassador Reeves stood. Commander Thals, can you establish a communication channel with the Devourers? Perhaps they can be reasoned with. Thals worked quickly. Within minutes, a channel opened. What came through was not words or even thoughts in any recognizable form. It was hunger. Pure, vast, endless hunger that made everyone in the room feel sick. One of the younger delegates vomited. Others backed away from the speakers as if the feeling could reach through and touch them. The message was clear. The Devourers didn't want to talk. They wanted to feed. Over the next 3 days, 2 more worlds fell silent. Civilian ships that tried to defend their homes were swept aside like insects. Mining lasers and cargo tractor beams did nothing against the Devourer bioships. Refugees fled in every direction, clogging space lanes, overwhelming stations. The Confederation Council met in continuous session. They tried everything they could think of. Economic sanctions, which made no sense against creatures that didn't trade. Diplomatic pressure, which assumed the Devourers cared about galactic opinion. Strongly worded condemnations that echoed uselessly into the void. Thals reported each day with worse news. They're spreading, following predictable expansion patterns. At this rate, they'll reach the core worlds within 2 months, and we cannot stop them. We need weapons, a delegate said. We need soldiers. We need time to rebuild our defenses. Building a military fleet from nothing takes decades, Thals said flatly. We don't have decades. We have weeks. Zithrael looked across the chamber at Ambassador Reeves. She met his gaze steadily. The question hung unspoken between them. The humans, Zithrael said finally, his pride crumbling. You have warships. You have weapons. You've been preparing for this. Reeves stood slowly. Not for this specifically. But yes, we're prepared for war. We're asking for your help, High Curator Mevla said, her crystalline voice barely audible. We're asking you to fight for us. To kill for us? The chamber fell silent. Everyone understood the weight of what they were asking. For 300 years, they had lectured humanity on their barbarism, their paranoia, their primitive attachment to violence, and now they needed that violence to survive. Ambassador Reeves looked at Dr. Okoye, who nodded slightly. She took a breath. I need to contact Earth Command. The fleet is stationed at Outpost Sanctuary, 47 light years from here. We'll need authorization from the President and Parliament. How long? Thals asked. For authorization? A few hours. For the fleet to arrive? She paused. 3 days. The Valorian counselor who had questioned humanity's military spending looked confused. But that's impossible. Standard FTL drive takes weeks to cross that distance. Reeves smiled, but it was a warrior's smile, cold and sharp. We don't use standard FTL drives on our warships, counselor. We use military-grade jump drives. Much faster, much more dangerous, much more expensive. The kind of technology you asked us to stop developing. 3 days later, space above the Confederation capital rippled and tore. One by one, 13 massive warships emerged from jump space in perfect formation. They were nothing like the elegant curves of Confederation vessels. They were angular, brutal, covered in armor plating and weapon ports. The largest ship, the UESS Retribution, took position at the fleet center. On its bridge, Captain Sarah Chen sat in her command chair watching the Confederation capital grow larger on the view screen. Her face was calm, but her hands gripped the armrest tightly. Send a message to the Confederation Council, she said. Humanity has arrived. Tell them the fleet is ready. In the council chamber, Zithrael watched the human warships on the display. He felt a mixture of relief and shame. They had been saved by the very violence they had condemned. And he wondered, not for the first time, if humanity had been right all along. Captain Sarah Chen stood in the observation deck of the Retribution, looking out at the gathered Confederation representatives. They stared at her ship with expressions ranging from hope to horror. She had expected this. To species that had lived in peace for 3 centuries, a true warship must look like a monster. And the Retribution was definitely a monster. 500 meters of reinforced titanium ceramic composite armor, railguns that could punch through a small moon, missile batteries loaded with nuclear warheads, point defense lasers that could track and destroy 1,000 targets simultaneously, and a crew of 800 trained warriors who drilled constantly for combat they hoped would never come. Until now. Zithrael was among the observers, standing with Commander Thalses and several other council members. He approached Chen cautiously, as if afraid the ship itself might attack him. Captain Chen, he said, his voice uncertain. Thank you for coming. We are grateful, Chen nodded. She was a woman in her mid-40s with short, dark hair and eyes that had seen too much. Save your thanks until we've actually helped, Ambassador. Right now we need information. Tell me everything about these devourers. They moved to the briefing room, where holographic displays showed the current tactical situation. It was worse than Chen had expected. 7 worlds lost completely. Dozens of stations evacuated. The Devourer fleet was spreading like a virus through Confederation space. They don't seem to follow our understanding of physics, Thals explained. Their ships are organic living things. They heal damage. They adapt to attacks. They don't need fuel or supplies in any conventional sense. But they can be killed, Dr. Okoye said, joining the group. He had come aboard with the Confederation delegation. The ancient races defeated them before. They're tough but not invincible. Lieutenant Commander Akari Tanaka, Chen's tactical officer, studied the data with professional interest. She was younger than Chen, sharp-featured and intense. Captain, I recommend we observe one of their ships in action before engagement. We need to understand how they fight. Agreed, Chen said. Commander Thalles, are there any active battles we can reach quickly? The colony on Reshitar sent a distress call 20 minutes ago, Thalses said. They have perhaps 6 hours before the Devourers arrive. Set course, Chen ordered. Maximum combat speed. And get me Admiral Webb on secure channel. The Retribution and 5 escort frigates jumped to the Reshitar system. They arrived to find a pathetic defense. Cargo ships trying to slow the Devourers. Civilian vessels attempting to evacuate millions of colonists. And bearing down on them, 3 massive Devourer bioships, each the size of a small city. Zithrael watched from the observation deck, unable to look away. The Devourer ships were nightmares made real. They pulsed with unnatural life, covered in what looked like eyes and mouths and things that defied description. Tentacles hundreds of meters long reached out, grabbing cargo ships and pulling them into grinding maws. "Those ships," he whispered. "They're eating everything." "Now you understand," Chen said quietly, standing beside him. "This isn't a war about territory or ideology. It's about survival. Yours and theirs. And only one side can win." She touched her comm badge. "All ships, battle stations. Tanaka, initiate attack pattern Delta 7. Let's see what these things are made of." The Retribution moved forward with surprising grace for something so large. The escort frigates spread into formation, creating overlapping fields of fire, and then at 3,000 kilometers Chen gave the order. "Fire." The railguns spoke first. Tungsten rounds accelerated to a fraction of light speed, invisible until they impacted. The nearest Devourer ship shuddered as rounds punched through its organic hull. Strange fluids leaked into space, freezing instantly. But the ship didn't die. Even as Zithrael watched, the wounds began to close. The hull rippled and reformed, healing the damage within seconds. "Adaptive regeneration," Tanaka reported. "Impressive. Captain, recommend switching to thermal weapons." "Agreed. All ships, fire missiles, pattern Omega." Dozens of missiles streaked from the human ships. These weren't conventional explosives. As they neared the Devourer, they detonated in sequence, creating a wave of plasma heat that turned space itself into fire. The Devourer ship's healing couldn't keep up with that. Its outer layers burned away, and it let out a sound that made everyone aboard the Retribution clutch their heads in pain. "It's screaming," Zithrael gasped. "It's alive and it's screaming." "Yes," Chen said, her face grim. "War is never pretty, Ambassador. But it's them or us." The damaged Devourer tried to retreat, but the human frigates pursued, their lasers cutting into its wounded sections. Within minutes, the massive creature stopped moving, its bioluminescent veins going dark. It was dead. The other two Devourers changed tactics immediately. They split up, trying to flank the human formation. But Chen had expected this. She had studied every scrap of ancient data about these creatures. She knew they were intelligent, adaptive, dangerous. "Tanaka, implement Plan Beta 4. Show them what happens when they try to surround us." The Retribution's engines flared, and it spun in space, bringing all its weapons to bear on one Devourer, while the frigates handled the other. It was a dance, violent and precise, humanity's skill in warfare honed over centuries of practice. The Confederation observers watched in awe as the human ships moved with perfect coordination, each covering the other's weaknesses, each strike calculated for maximum effect. The second Devourer died in a nuclear fireball. The third, seeing its companions destroyed, tried to flee. Chen let it go. "Let it run," she said. "Let it tell the others what happened here." The evacuation ships cheered. The Confederation delegates looked at Chen with new respect and new fear. Commander Thals clicked his mandibles thoughtfully. "You've done this before," he said. "Not against Devourers, but you've fought wars. Real wars. Humanity's history is full of wars," Dr. Okoye said sadly. "Against each other, usually. We've had centuries to perfect the art of killing. It's not something we're proud of, but it is something we're good at." Over the next week, the human fleet engaged the Devourers 17 times. They won every engagement. Word spread through the Confederation that hope existed, but the cost was becoming clear. The Devourers adapted with each battle, learning from their losses. They started using new tactics, creating diversions, attacking supply lines, and intelligence reports brought terrible news. The main Devourer fleet was massing at the edge of explored space. Not dozens of ships, thousands. Admiral Marcus Webb arrived on the Retribution to coordinate the defense. He was an older man, gray-haired and scarred, with the look of someone who had seen too many friends die. He gathered the Confederation military leaders, such as they were, in the briefing room. "We can't win a defensive war," Webb said bluntly. "There are too many of them. They'll overwhelm us eventually through sheer numbers." "Then what do you suggest?" Mevla asked. Her crystal surface had lost its usual luster, dimmed by stress and fear. "Offensive operations," Webb said. "We take the fight to them. We hit their staging areas, disrupt their coordination, make them react to us instead of the other way around." The Confederation leaders looked shocked. "Attack them?" Zithrael said. "In their own territory? It's the only way," Chen said. "Defense is passive. It gives them all the advantages, but we're good at offense. We're very good at it." Thals has studied the tactical map. To do this, We would need to train Confederation forces in your methods. Our people don't know how to fight. Then we teach them, Webb said. Starting now. We have perhaps 3 weeks before the main Devourer fleet reaches the core worlds. That's not much time, but it's what we have. The training began immediately. Human soldiers taught Confederation citizens how to use weapons, how to think tactically, how to fight and kill and survive. It was hard for species that had known only peace. Some couldn't do it, breaking down under the stress. But others learned quickly, driven by the need to protect their families. A young Valorian named Shaltir became one of the best students. She had lost her entire family when her homeworld fell. She approached Chen one day during training exercises. "Why do you do this?" Shaltir asked. "You could have stayed safe. This isn't your war." Chen looked at her for a long moment. "It became our war the moment we joined the Confederation. When you make a commitment to stand with others, you keep it. That's what being human means. At least that's what it's supposed to mean." In his quarters, Zithrael recorded a message to the Confederation archives. "I was wrong," he said quietly. "We were all wrong. We thought evolution meant leaving violence behind. But perhaps true evolution is knowing when violence is necessary and being strong enough to use it in defense of those who cannot defend themselves. The humans don't love war, but they understand it. And right now, that understanding is all that stands between us and extinction." The 3 weeks passed quickly. The combined fleet, human warships surrounded by Confederation vessels retrofitted with what weapons they could carry, waited at the edge of the core systems. And then, like a dark tide, the Devourer Armada appeared. Chen looked at the tactical display showing thousands of enemy contacts and felt the old familiar fear before battle. But she pushed it down, buried it under layers of training and discipline. "All ships," she broadcasted. "This is Captain Chen. Today we fight not just for the Confederation, but for..." The battle lasted 3 days without pause. Space became a graveyard of ships, both allied and enemy. The Devourer fleet was massive, but the combined forces fought with desperate courage. Human tactics mixed with Confederation innovation created strategies neither side could have achieved alone. On the second day, the fleet fought in the Veil Nebula, a region of dense gas and cosmic dust. Admiral Webb saw an opportunity and seized it. He ordered the human ships to lure a large Devourer formation deep into the nebula's thickest regions. "They can't see through this soup any better than we can," Webb explained to Thals, "but we have better sensors, and we know how to fight blind." The trap worked perfectly. Devourer ships stumbled through the nebula, separated from their hive coordination. Human frigates struck from concealment, firing and disappearing back into the cosmic fog. Confederation ships, crewed by newly trained warriors, followed the patterns they had learned, supporting the human vessels with covering fire. But the Devourers learned quickly, adapting even faster than expected. They released smaller organisms, living sensors that spread through the nebula like a net. The ambush advantages disappeared. Ships that had been hunters became hunted. The Confederation cruiser Harmony's Dream, retrofitted with human weapons but still crewed primarily by civilians turned soldiers, found itself surrounded. Its captain, a crystalline named Velmarsh, broadcast a final message. "Tell my family I fought well. Tell them the peace was worth protecting." The Harmony's Dream rammed itself into the largest Devourer ship, its makeshift nuclear reactor overloading on impact. The explosion consumed both vessels and cleared a path for refugee ships to escape. Zithrael watched from the command ship, his hands shaking. He had known Velmarsh for 40 years. They had shared meals, discussed philosophy, laughed together. Now his friend was gone, atomized in an instant of violence. "This is the price," Dr. Okoye said quietly, standing beside him. "This is what we tried to tell you. War isn't glorious. It's sacrifice. It's losing people you love to protect people you've never met." The third day brought the hardest fighting. A Devourer breakthrough force reached the refugee convoy heading away from the front lines. Human escort ships moved to intercept, outnumbered 5-1. Among them was the destroyer Defiance, commanded by Captain Miguel Torres. Ensign Marcus Lee, barely 22 years old, manned the weapons station aboard the Defiance. He was scared, exhausted, and determined. In his pocket, he carried a photo of a Valorian family he had befriended during the evacuation of Tarsus Prime. They were in the convoy somewhere. "Trying to reach safety, Captain," the tactical officer reported. "The Devourers are breaking through. They're heading for Convoy Section 7. Torres didn't hesitate. All power to engines. We're going to block them. The Defiance accelerated, putting itself between the Devourer ships and the helpless refugees. Its weapons fired continuously, tearing into enemy hulls. But there were too many. The Devourers swarmed around the destroyer, their organic weapons ripping through shields and armor. Hull breach on decks 3 through 5, someone reported. The ship shuddered as something massive impacted it. "Sir, they're boarding us," Lee said, his voice tight with fear. Through the internal cameras, they could see Devourer organisms flooding through the breached sections. They looked like nightmares, all teeth and claws and hunger. "Seal the bridge," Torres ordered. "Everyone grab a weapon. If they want this ship, they'll have to pry it from our dead hands." The bridge crew, 15 men and women from Earth, made their stand. They had trained for this, hoped it would never happen, and now faced it with the courage of those who choose to stand rather than run. Lee thought of the Valorian family, hoped they made it to safety, and fired his sidearm at the creatures tearing through the bridge door. The Defiance died hard, taking 4 Devourer ships with it. By the time reinforcements arrived, there were no survivors. But the convoy escaped. Thousands of civilians lived because 15 humans chose to die. Captain Chen received the report while coordinating another engagement. She read it twice, her face carefully blank, then set it aside. There would be time to grieve later. Now there were more battles to fight. But Shaltir, the young Valorian training with the human Marines, heard about the Defiance. She learned that Ensign Lee had saved the convoy section carrying her people, the survivors from her world. She found Dr. Okoye in the medical bay helping treat wounded. "Why?" she asked, tears streaming down her copper-colored face. "Why did they do it? They could have run. They could have saved themselves." Okoye looked tired, older than his years. "Because that's what soldiers do, Shaltir. They put themselves between danger and those who can't fight. Lee knew your people were in that convoy. He made a choice." "I don't understand humans," she said. "You're capable of such violence, but also such sacrifice. How can both exist in the same species?" "They exist in all species," Okoye said gently. "You just forgot because you didn't need to remember. But now you're remembering. You fought yesterday, didn't you?" "Fought well, I heard," she nodded. "I killed 3 Devourer organisms. I felt sick after. But I would do it again to protect others. Then you understand more than you think." The battles continued, each one costly, each one necessary. The combined fleet adapted and learned. Drykon, a reptilian engineer from the Confederation, worked alongside human technicians to modify ship systems. He began to understand the philosophy behind human military design. "Your ships aren't elegant," he said to one of the engineers. "They're brutal, functional, with redundancy built into every system." The engineer, a woman named Kim Park, nodded. "Pretty ships die when hit. Ugly ships keep fighting. We learned that the hard way centuries ago. We forgot so much," Dracon said. "We thought forgetting made us better. But some knowledge should never be lost." Intelligence reports confirmed what everyone feared. The main Devourer hive nexus, the central intelligence coordinating the entire invasion, had been located. It was aboard a massive bioship 3 times the size of anything they had encountered before. Positioned at the edge of the system, Admiral Webb called his command staff together, including Chen and the senior Confederation officers. "If we take out that hive nexus, we disrupt their coordination. The individual ships will still be dangerous, but they'll be confused, unorganized. It's a suicide mission," Thal said flatly. "That ship is surrounded by thousands of defenders." "Not if we create a diversion," Chen said, studying the tactical map. "Most of their fleet is engaged with our main forces. If we could pull more of them away, a small strike team might get through. We'd need to make them think we're attacking something vital," Webb said. "Something they'd commit forces to defend." Mevla's crystal form flickered with urgent light. "The Confederation homeworld is in this system. If they believed it was under serious attack, they would have to respond," Webb finished. He looked at Chen. "You're thinking what I'm thinking." Chen nodded slowly. "We make a run at the homeworld with the main fleet. All-out assault, everything we have. They pull forces from the hive nexus to defend. Meanwhile, a strike team uses the chaos to infiltrate." "It's risky," Zithrael said. "If the strike team fails, we've committed our entire fleet to a diversionary attack." "If we do nothing," Webb said, "we lose anyway. This war has taught me that the Confederation produces brave warriors when needed. Now we need to trust them." The decision was made. Chen volunteered to lead the strike team personally. Webb refused. "I need you commanding the retribution for the main assault," he said. This mission requires someone who can think creatively, adapt instantly, and lead a mixed team of humans and Confederation forces. He looked directly at Zithriel. Ambassador, you know your people better than any of us. You understand how they think, how they move. I want you on this mission. Zithrael stood in shocked silence. Him? A diplomat who had spent his life arguing against violence, leading a military strike? But he thought of Velmarsh sacrificing himself for others, of Ensign Lee dying to save strangers, of all the soldiers, human and Confederation alike, who had given everything. I'll do it, he said. Tell me what you need. The plan was set in motion. The combined fleet would initiate the Prometheus Protocol, a desperate all-or-nothing assault on the Confederation homeworld's orbital space, drawing Devourer forces away from the Hive Nexus. Meanwhile, Zithrael and a strike team of 20 volunteers, human and alien together, would infiltrate the Hive Nexus and destroy it from within. As the fleet prepared for battle, Chen found Zithrael in the armory, awkwardly fitting himself with combat armor designed for humans. I never wanted to wear this, he said quietly. Never wanted to hold a weapon? I know, Chen said, but you're doing it anyway. That's what courage is, Ambassador. Doing what's necessary even when it terrifies you. She helped him adjust the armor properly. The team is good. They'll watch your back. Trust them, trust yourself, and remember what you're fighting for. Peace, Zithrael said. Strange how we must wage war to protect it. Chen smiled sadly. That's the human condition. Maybe now it's the Confederation condition too. The fleet began its attack run and the final desperate gambit commenced. The main fleet struck the Confederation homeworld's orbit like a hammer. Captain Chen watched from the Retribution's bridge as thousands of ships, human and Confederation together, engaged the Devourer forces in the most desperate battle yet. Explosions lit up space like deadly fireworks. Ships died every second, both sides taking horrific casualties. They're taking the bait, Lieutenant Tanaka reported. Devourer ships are breaking off from the Hive Nexus. They're committing everything to defend their position here. Good, Chen said, though her face showed the cost. Another Confederation cruiser died on the view screen, its crew of newly trained warriors going down fighting. Keep the pressure on. Make them believe this is our real target. Far from the main battle, Zithrael's strike team approached the massive Hive Nexus in a captured Devourer organism. The human technical specialist, Sergeant Rodriguez, had managed to convince the small bioship that they were part of the Hive. It was disgusting sitting inside a living creature that smelled of decay and alien biology, but it worked. The team consisted of 20 volunteers, 10 humans, including Dr. Okoye, who insisted on coming despite his civilian status, 10 Confederation members, including Shaltir the young Valorian warrior, and Drakon the engineer. They carried enough explosives to crack a small moon, all focused on one goal: reach the Hive Nexus core and destroy it. We're passing through their outer perimeter, Rodriguez said, his hands working the organic controls with visible disgust. So far they think we're one of them. Zithrael checked his weapon for the 10th time. His hands had stopped shaking somewhere during the approach. Terror had given way to a strange calm, the acceptance that came with knowing you might not survive. Ambassador, Okoye said quietly, if we don't make it, I want you to know it's been an honor serving alongside you. The honor is mine, Zithrael replied. You humans taught us that strength isn't the same as cruelty, and that peace requires guardians. They penetrated deeper into the Hive Nexus. The bioship was impossibly vast inside, a maze of organic corridors pulsing with alien life. The team moved quickly, following Drakon, who had studied the structural scans. The core should be 3 kilometers ahead, he whispered. That's where the Central Intelligence resides. They encountered their first patrol after 2 kilometers. Devourer organisms, smaller than the bioships but still deadly, sensed something wrong. The team opened fire. In the narrow corridors there was no room for tactics, just brutal close-quarters combat. Shaltir fought like a demon, her copper skin splattered with alien blood. A Devourer organism lunged at her. She killed it with 3 precise shots, exactly as the human Marines had taught her. No hesitation, no mercy, just survival. They lost 2 people in that corridor, a human corporal and a crystalline soldier named Felwyn, both torn apart by Devourer claws before their teammates could save them. The team pushed forward, leaving their dead behind because stopping meant everyone died. The corridor opened into a massive chamber. And there, pulsing with sickly bioluminescence, was the core. It was beautiful and horrible at once. A vast neural network of living tissue and alien thought. Billions of neurons firing in patterns that coordinated the entire Devourer fleet. "Plant the charges," Zithriel ordered, sounding more confident than he felt. "We have 10 minutes before they realize we're here." The team spread out, placing explosive charges at structural weak points Drakon identified. The work went quickly, practiced hands moving with efficiency born of desperate training. Then Okoye stopped. He was staring at a section of the core where images seemed to flicker, broadcast from the neural tissue itself. "Wait," he said. "Everyone, look at this." The images showed worlds dying, consumed by the Devourers. But they also showed something else. A dying region of space, stars going supernova in a cascading chain reaction. The Devourers fleeing that cosmic catastrophe, desperate, starving, searching for any source of biological matter to survive. "They're refugees," Okoye said, his voice filled with horror and understanding. "They're not evil. They're running from their own apocalypse. They're just trying to survive." Zithriel felt his world tilt. All this death, all this sacrifice, and the enemy was just as desperate as they were. "But they're still killing us," he said. "They're consuming entire civilizations." "Because they don't know any other way," Okoye said. "They're a hive mind evolved to consume. They probably don't even understand that other species are truly sentient." Rodriguez looked at the charges. "We have 6 minutes before these blow. If we're going to change the plan, now's the time." The team looked at Zithriel. Somehow, the diplomat who had never wanted to be a soldier had become their commander. The decision was his. He thought about Velmarsh dying for peace, about Ensign Lee sacrificing himself for strangers, about all the dead on both sides, victims of a cosmic tragedy neither truly understood. "Okoye," he said, "can you communicate with it? Can you make it understand?" "Maybe," Okoye said. "The neural patterns are complex, but there's definitely intelligence here. If I can access the core directly, establish a mental bridge." "Do it," Zithriel ordered. "We don't have much time." Okoye approached the core, placing his hands on the pulsing tissue. The team watched tensely, weapons ready. If this went wrong, they would all die here. Okoye's eyes went wide, then closed. His body went rigid as his mind touched something vast and alien and hungry. He gasped. And when he spoke, his voice was layered with something else, something that echoed with the voice of billions. "We hunger, always hunger. The stars die.
We die.
Must feed, we know," Zithriel said, stepping forward. "But you don't have to kill us. There are other ways. Uninhabited systems, resources we can share. We can help you." The presence in Okoye's mind recoiled, confused. The concept of help was foreign to creatures who had only ever known consuming or being consumed. Zithriel continued, speaking quickly. "You're intelligent. You can learn. We've mapped thousands of systems rich with biological matter but no sentient life. We can guide you there. You can feed without killing anyone. Why? Would you help?" "Because that's what civilized species do," Zithriel said. "We find solutions that let everyone survive. It's harder than fighting, but it's better." The hive mind processed this, and in that moment the battle above the homeworld changed. Devourer ships began breaking off, pulling back. The coordination that had made them so deadly was faltering, as the hive nexus struggled with a completely new concept. On the Retribution's bridge, Chen watched in confusion as the enemy fleet withdrew. "What's happening? Are they retreating?" "Captain, we're receiving a transmission," the communications officer said. "It's from Ambassador Zithriel's team. They're saying, 'Stand down?' They're negotiating?" Chen's mouth fell open. A negotiation. In the middle of the greatest battle in Confederation history, someone was negotiating. In the hive nexus core, Okoye maintained the mental bridge while Drakon worked frantically at his datapad. "I'm sending star maps," the engineer said. "Systems rich with primitive life, no sentient species. Enough to feed 100 devourer fleets." The presence considered, felt the truth in the offer, understood perhaps for the first time that not every species was prey. That some could be something else, partners, helpers, friends. Except, we'll go to these systems. We'll not consume sentient life. "And if you're attacked?" Zithriel asked. "If someone threatens you, we defend. But we do not hunt." It wasn't a perfect solution. The devourers would still consume living matter, just not sentient species. They would still be dangerous if provoked. But it was a solution that didn't require the extinction of either side. Okoye collapsed as the mental bridge broke. Rodriguez caught him, checking his vital signs. He's alive. Exhausted but alive. Disarm the charges, Zithrael ordered. We're done here. The war ended not with a final battle but with an agreement. The Devourer fleet withdrew to the uninhabited systems, guided by Confederation nav beacons. They would feed, grow, heal their wounded, and they would remember the species that chose to help rather than exterminate. But the cost had been terrible. 7 worlds lost, millions dead, hundreds of ships destroyed. The Confederation capital held a memorial service that lasted 3 days, honoring the fallen from every species. Captain Chen stood in the human section of the memorial garden, looking at the names carved in stone. So many names. The entire crew of the Defiance. Ensign Marcus Lee, 22 years old, who died protecting strangers. Hundreds of others who had volunteered to fight a war that wasn't theirs. Shaltir found her there. The young Valorian warrior moved differently now, with the careful precision of someone who had seen combat. Captain Chen, she said quietly, I wanted to thank you for everything. We did what needed doing, Chen said. Nothing more. No, Shaltir said. You did more. You could have destroyed the Devourers completely, but you gave them a chance. That's what makes you different. You know how to fight, but you also know when to stop. Chen smiled sadly. We learned that lesson the hard way, Shaltir. Hopefully you won't have to. Months passed. The Confederation rebuilt, but it rebuilt differently. They created the Joint Defense Force, a combined military organization training under human veterans. Species that had never held weapons,